doubt 9 out of 10 people would agree that Peppa Pig is a cartoon that marked their childhood in some way. But does everyone, including you, really know how many times Peppa has done terrible things throughout her show? One of the most striking examples is the scene where Peppa and George are having a picnic in the backyard. When it starts to rain, their parents call them inside. Peppa forgets her teddy bear Teddy outside, and when she realizes Daddy Pig rushes out to get it. He returns completely soaked and exhausted after braving a thunderstorm with rain and lightning just to save his daughter's favorite toy. When he finally gets back, Peppa only cares about Teddy's condition, saying he's wet, while totally ignoring her dad's effort as he stands there drenched. Daddy Pig definitely deserved a lot more appreciation. After all, he risked his safety to please his daughter, who didn't seem to care about what he went through. Surprisingly, besides ignoring her dad's love and care, this little pink pig has also caused trouble among her friends and others around her. Today, we'll explore each of these moments and recall times when Peppa was far more cruel than we could have imagined. So put on your golden boots and let's dive into the fascinating world of Peppa Pig. In another instance, Peppa visits a museum with her family. When she sees a replica of the Queen of England's crown, she immediately imagines herself as the Queen of Chocolate Cake. While lost in her imagination, we see that Peppa likes being treated as royalty and is comfortable imagining her parents and brother calling her Your Majesty and serving her as if they were her subjects. Although she doesn't actually act out, this fantasy shows how Peppa is quite selfish, thinking much more of herself than of anyone else. Some might call this self-love, but for others, it's easy to see how this can seem selfish. Another memorable episode is when Peppa decides to spend the night at her grandparents' house while her parents are away. Knowing no one would be around to keep her mischief in check, she leads George to play in the room and make noise. Then, when she hears her grandparents coming up the stairs, Peppa and George pretend to be asleep to fool the elderly couple. As the older sibling, Peppa takes on the responsibility of leading George. But in this case, she does it just to trick her own grandparents. To many, this might seem like innocent mischief, but is it really okay to lie and disobey the elders? After this prank on her grandparents, Peppa and George decide they want more fun. They ask Grandpa to play throwing up in the air. George is smaller and lighter, but Peppa is 2 years older and much heavier, which is hard on Grandpa, who doesn't have the same energy as before. Even noticing he was getting tired, Peppa insists he keep playing. When Grandma notices, she even comments that he's exhausted, but Peppa just laughs. This moment truly shows how, in some situations, Peppa can be more insensitive than expected. One scene that grabs a lot of attention is when Peppa is at home and decides to play with her friends. During this game, she pretends that Teddy is a police officer and has him arrest all her friends' toys in a toy jail. Even though it seemed like a simple game, Peppa locks her friends' toys in jail and keeps only her own toy with her, without caring if her friends are left with nothing to play with. Peppa shows that as long as she has what she wants, she doesn't care if others are upset. This is a clear sign that the little pig is capable of doing whatever she wants to have fun, ignoring how her friends feel. If you also think this is too much, even for Peppa, comment down below with cruel. In yet another display of disrespect, Peppa ignores her own dad at bedtime. This happens in an episode where Daddy Pig sits by his children's bed to tell them a story before they fall asleep. Right from the start, he reveals that the story is called The Sleepy Princess. But as soon as he starts, Peppa interrupts with a comment, calling the story boring, even though Daddy Pig has never told it before. This behavior shows what many have already noticed. Peppa doesn't seem to have much patience for her own dad. This attitude even inspired parody versions of the show, like Papa Pig, where Peppa and her dad are practically enemies. Even so, she keeps interrupting Daddy Pig throughout the story. Finally, her mom steps in and asks her to give her dad a chance to finish the story.
Peppa, if you keep talking, Daddy Pig can't start the story.
Kudos to Mummy Pig for finally putting Peppa in her place and letting Daddy Pig tell the story. Peppa's latest movie, Cinematic Party, revolves around a special wedding. Mr. Bull and Mrs. Cow, Mummy Pig and Peppa accompany their friend to the fabric shop, helping her pick a beautiful yellow fabric for her wedding dress. The future bride tries it on, loves how it looks, and decides to buy it. But as always, Peppa causes some mischief. She starts playing with the fabrics in the store, and during her game, she accidentally cuts Mrs. Cow's wedding dress, turning it into a Swiss cheese. Luckily for Peppa, Mrs. Cow loves the look with the holes since she's a fan of cheese. So, everything turns out fine in the end. But surely, if it weren't for this coincidence, the wedding ceremony would have been a major disaster. At least this time, Peppa wasn't the only one at fault. In the episode Susie Moves Away, Peppa shows another one of her slightly cruel moments. Even though she seems sad about Susie's departure, Peppa doesn't miss the chance to make a sarcastic comment while saying goodbye to her friend. Without much thought, she mentions that she'll miss Susie, even though the sheep is bossy. This comment instantly irritates Susie, who stands up, offended by Peppa's not-so-friendly farewell. Of course, they make up in the end, since Susie is leaving. But even so, Peppa's cruel remark shows that she knows how to provoke her friends, especially when she thinks she might not see them again. In the same farewell episode, we see another questionable act from Peppa. During the farewell party, Peppa decides to give Susie a present and chooses her plastic crown. With the best of intentions, she offers the item as a gift. However, right after this, Mummy Sheep gets an unexpected call, informing her that Susie's move is canceled because she won't have a job abroad. At that moment, Peppa quickly asks for the crown back since Susie won't be leaving anymore. This act shows that Peppa doesn't fully understand the concept of a gift, as a gift can't just be taken back. Her behavior here is truly terrible. In another episode, Peppa, George, and their school friends visit a toothbrush and toothpaste factory, where Miss Rabbit greets them. We know Miss Rabbit has an enormous number of jobs, so this is just another one for her. George notices some products and wishes to have his own toothbrush and toothpaste. Peppa then claims that everyone will receive a bag full of freebies. However, hearing this promise made by Peppa in front of everyone, Miss Rabbit is visibly startled, feeling quite embarrassed. With little choice, she discreetly steps away and starts preparing the dental kits for the children because now everyone expects to get one. Once again, Peppa seems unaware that certain things shouldn't be promised so easily, especially if they're not hers to give. If you love Peppa's World, this is your chance to never miss a new video. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with all the details and curiosities of your favorite cartoons. In one episode of the Pink Pig series, the pig family decides to enjoy a few days of vacation in sunny Italy. Quite a contrast from Peppa's usual rainy town. While they're away, Grandma and Grandpa Pig take on the responsibility of looking after Goldie, the family's goldfish. When they return, Peppa quickly notices that Goldie has grown a lot, as her grandparents didn't hold back on feeding the little fish. But instead of thanking her grandparents for taking such good care of Goldie, Peppa gives a look of dissatisfaction and can't resist complaining to her own grandpa. Seriously, a simple thank you wouldn't hurt, and it would show at least a bit of gratitude for the favor they did. In moments like these, Peppa's arrogance really shines through. In another episode, we see Peppa and George in a rather intense and unusual dispute over the remote control. George, being just a toddler, is at a great disadvantage, but that doesn't stop Peppa from being unyielding. As the older sister, it would probably be more mature of her to explain the situation to George instead of practically trying to split the remote in half. Right after that, Peppa and George find themselves in another argument, this time during lunch, when they start fighting over a simple carrot. And does Peppa make things worse? Yes! She throws a plate full of food that ends up landing on Daddy Pig's head. This really crossed the line. Who would do that to their own dad? Peppa's behavior here was completely wrong and disrespectful. In one episode, where George is learning to use the potty, still being just a baby, Peppa doesn't miss the chance to make a not-so-nice comment. In front of Susie, and even her own mom, she looks at her younger brother with disdain and remarks smugly that he has no skill at all for using the potty. This attitude was totally unnecessary, and yet another example of Peppa's lack of sensitivity. We've reached the end of our list of Peppa's less-than-model behavior and questionable actions in various episodes. Of course, we might have exaggerated a bit on most of these, but let's agree that Peppa could be a little nicer most of the time. If you still want to enjoy more moments like this, just click on one of these two videos on the screen. See you in the next video!